Good evening, and welcome to Restored Lore, your home for old, odd, and obscure stories. I hope you guys aren't tired of stories with incredible twists, because I am not, and tonight we have a humdinger. Our story is The Two Householders by Arthur Thomas Quiller-Couch. The story was first published in 1891, and I think it was originally called A Nocturnal Adventure. I've seen it published 3 times in that year, twice as A Nocturnal Adventure, and then thereafter as The Two Householders. In all cases, it claims to be, quote, an extract from the Memoirs of Gabriel Foot, Highwayman, end quote. But we'll discuss that further at the end. Right now, let's open our imaginations and begin. I will say this, speaking as accurately as a man may so long afterward, that when I first spied the house, it put no desire in me but just to give thanks. For, conceive my case. It was near midnight by this, and ever since dusk I had been tracking the naked moors of Foot in the teeth of as vicious a nor'wester as it ever drenched a man to the skin and then blew the cold home to his marrow. My clothes were sodden, my coat-tails flapped with a noise like pistol shots, my boots squeaked as I went. Overhead the October moon was in her last quarter, and might have been a slice of fingernail for all the light she afforded. 2/3 of the time the rack blotted her out altogether, and I, with my stick clipped tight under my armpit, eyes puckered up, and head bent like a budding ram's, but a little aslant, had to keep my wits agog to distinguish the glimmer of the road from the black heath to right and left. For 3 hours I had met neither man nor man's dwelling, and, for all I knew, I was desperately lost. Indeed, at the crossroads there had been nothing for me but to choose the way that kept the wind in my face, and it gnawed me like a dog. Mainly to allay the stinging of my eyes, I pulled up at last, turned right about face, leaned back against the blast with a hand on my hat, and surveyed the blackness I had traversed. It was at this instant that, far away to the left, a point of light caught my notice, faint but steady, and at once I felt sure it burned in the window of a house. The house, thought I, is a good mile off beside the other road, and the light must have been an inch over my hat brim for the last half hour, for my head had been sloped that way. This reflection, that on so wide a moor I had come near missing the information I wanted, and perhaps a supper, sent a strong thrill down my back. I cut straight across the heather toward the light, risking quags and pitfalls. Nay, so heartening was the chance to hear a fellow creature's voice that I broke into a run, skipping over the stunted gorse that cropped up here and there, and dreading every moment to see the light quenched. Suppose it burns in an upper window, and the family is going to bed, as would be likely at this hour. The apprehension kept my eyes fixed on the bright spot, to the scandal of my legs that within 5 minutes were stuck full of gorse prickles. But the light did not go out, and soon a flicker of moonlight gave me a glimpse of the house's outline. It proved to be a deal more imposing than I looked for, the outline, in fact, of a tall barrack with a cluster of chimneys at either end, like ears, and a high wall topped by the roofs of some outbuildings concealing the lower windows. There was no gate in this wall, and presently I guessed the reason. I was approaching the place from behind, and the light came from a back window on the first floor. The faintness of the light also was explained by this time. It shone behind a drab-colored blind, and in shape resembled the stem of a wine-glass, broadening out at the foot, an effect produced by the half-drawn curtains within. I came to a halt, waiting for the next ray of moonlight. At the same moment a rush of wind swept over the chimney stacks, and the wind there seemed to ride a human sigh. On this last point I may err. The gust had passed some seconds before I caught myself detecting this peculiar noise and trying to disengage it from the natural chords of the storm. From the next gust it was absent, and then, to my dismay, the light faded from the window. I was half-minded to call out, when it appeared again, this time in 2 windows, those next on the right to that where it had shone before. Almost at once it increased in brilliance, as if the person who carried it from the smaller room to the larger was lighting more candles, and now the illumination was strong enough to make fine gold thread of the rain that fell within its radiance, and fling 2 shafts of warm yellow over the coping of the back wall into the night. During the minute or more that I stood watching, no shadow fell on either blind. Between me and the wall ran a ditch, into the black obscurity of which the ground at my feet broke sharply away. Setting my back to the storm again, I followed the lip of this ditch around the wall's angle. Here was shelter, and here the ditch seemed to grow shallower. Not wishing, however, to mistake a bed of nettles or any such pitfall for solid earth, I kept pretty wide as I went on. The house was dark on this side, and the wall, as before, had no opening. Close beside the next angle grew a moss of thick gorse bushes, and, pushing through these, I found myself suddenly on a sound high road, with the wind tearing at me as furiously as ever. But here was the front, and I now perceived that the surrounding wall advanced some way before the house, so as to form a narrow courtelage. So much of it, too, as faced the road, had been whitewashed, which made it easy to find the gate. But as I laid my hand upon the latch, I had a surprise. A line of paving stones led from the gate to a heavy porch, and along the wet surface of these fell a streak of light from the front door, which stood ajar. That a door should remain 6 inches open on such a night was astonishing enough, until I entered the court and found it as still as a room, owing to the high wall, and doubtless the porch gave additional protection. But looking up and assuring myself that all the rest of the facade was black as ink, I wondered at the inmates, thus careless of their property. It was here that my professional instincts received the first jog. Abating the sound of my feet on the paving stones, I went up to the door and pushed it softly. It opened without noise. I stepped into a fair-sized hall of modern build, paved with red tiles and lit with a small hanging lamp. To right and left were doors leading to the ground floor rooms. Along the wall by my shoulder ran a line of pegs, on which hung 6 hats and greatcoats, every one of clerical shape, and full in front of me a broad staircase ran up with a staring Brussels carpet, the colors and patterns of which I can recall as well as today's breakfast. Under this staircase was set a stand full of walking sticks, and a table littered with gloves, brushes, a handbell, a riding crop, 1 or 2 dog whistles, and a bedroom candle with tinderbox beside it. This, with one notable exception, was all the furniture. The exception, which turned me cold, was the form of a yellow mastiff dog curled on a mat beneath the table. The arch of his back was toward me, and one forepaw lay over his nose in a natural posture of sleep. I leaned back on the wainscoting, with my eyes tightly fixed on him, and my thoughts flying back, with something of regret, to the storm I had come through. But a man's habits are not easily denied. At the end of 3 minutes the dog had not moved, and I was down on the doormat unlacing my soaked boots. Slipping them off and taking them in my left hand, I stood up and tried to step toward the stairs, with eyes alert for any movement of the mastiff, but he never stirred. I was glad enough, however, on reaching the stairs, to find them newly built and the carpet thick. Up I went, with a glance at every step for the table which now hid the brute's form from me, and never a creak did I wake out of that staircase till I was almost at the first landing, when my toe caught a loose stair rod and rattled it in a way that stopped my heart, and then set it going in double-quick time. I stood still, with a hand on the rail. My eyes were now on a level with the floor of the landing, out of which branched 2 passages, one by my right hand, the other to the left, at the foot of the next flight, so placed that I was gazing down the length of it. And almost at the end there fell a parallelogram of light across it from an open door. A man who has once felt it knows there is only one kind of silence that can be fitly called dead. This is only to be found in a great house at midnight. For a few seconds after I rattled the stair rod, you might have cut the silence with a knife. If the house held a clock, it ticked inaudibly. Upon this silence, at the end of a minute, broke a light sound, the clink, clink of a decanter on the rim of a wineglass. It came from the room where the light was. Now, perhaps it was the very thought of liquor put warmth into my cold bones. It is certain that all of a sudden I straightened my back, took the remaining stairs at 2 strides, and walked down the passage as bold as brass, without caring a jot for the noise I made. In the doorway I halted. The room was long, lined for the most part with books bound in what they call divinity calf, and littered with papers like a barrister's table on a size day. Before the fireplace, where a few coals burned sulkily, was drawn a leathern elbow chair, and beside it, on the corner of a writing table, were set an unlit candle and a pile of manuscripts. At the opposite end of the room, a curtained door led, as I guessed, to the chamber that I had first seen illuminated. All this I took in with the tail of my eye, while staring straight in front, where, in the middle of a great square of carpet between me and the window, was a table with a red cloth upon it. On this cloth were a couple of wax candles, lit in silver stands, a tray, and a decanter of brandy. And between me and the table stood a man. He stood sideways, leaning a little back, as if to keep his shadow off the threshold, and looked at me over his left shoulder. A bald, grave man, slightly under the common height, with a long clerical coat of preposterous fit hanging loosely from his shoulder, a white cravat, black breeches, and black stockings. His feet were loosely thrust into carpet slippers. I judged his age at 50 or thereabouts, but his face rested in the shadow, and I could only note a pair of eyes, very small and alert, twinkling above a large expanse of cheek. He was lifting a wineglass from the table at the moment when I appeared, and it trembled now in his right hand. I heard a spilt drop or two fall on the carpet, and this was all the evidence he showed of discomposure. Setting the glass back, he felt in his breast pocket for a handkerchief, failed to find one, and rubbed his hands together to get the liquor off his fingers. "You startled me," he said, in a matter-of-fact tone, turning his eyes upon me as he lifted the glass again and emptied it. "How did you find your way in?" "By the front door," said I, wondering at his unconcern. He nodded his head slowly. "Ah, I forgot to lock it. You came to steal, I suppose?" "I came because I'd lost my way. I've been traveling this God-forsaken moor since dusk." "With your boots in your hand," he put in quietly. "I took them off out of respect to the yellow dog you keep." "He lies in a natural attitude, huh?" "You don't tell me he was stuffed." The old man's eyes beamed with contemptuous pity. "You are indifferently sharp, my dear sir, for a housebreaker. Come in. Set down those convicting boots, and don't drip pools of water in the very doorway of all places. If I must entertain a burglar, I prefer him tidy." He walked to the fire, picked up a poker, and knocked the coals into a blaze. This done, he turned round to me, with the poker still in his hand. The serenest gravity sat on his large, hale features. "Why have I done this?" he asked. "I suppose to get possession of the poker." "Quite right. May I inquire your next move?" "Why," said I, feeling in my pocket, "I carry a pistol." "Which I suppose to be damp?" "By no means. I carry it, as you see, in an oilcloth case." He stopped and laid the poker carefully in the fender. "That is a stronger card than I possess. I might urge that by pulling the trigger you would certainly alarm the house and the neighborhood and put a halter around your neck. I say I might urge this and assume you to be an intelligent auditor. But it strikes me as safer to assume you capable of using a pistol with effect at 3 paces. With what might happen subsequently, I will not pretend to be concerned. It is sufficient that I dislike the notion of being perforated. The fate of your neck," he waved a hand. "Well, I've known you for just 5 minutes and feel but a moderate interest in your neck. As for the inmates of this house, it will refresh you to hear that there are none. I have lived here 2 years with a butler and a female cook, both of whom I dismissed yesterday at a minute's notice for conduct which I will not shock your ears by explicitly naming. Suffice it to say, I carried them off yesterday to my parish church 2 miles away, married them, and dismissed them in the vestry without characters. I wish you had known that, butler. But, excuse me, with the information I have supplied, you ought to find no difficulty in fixing the price you will take to clear out of my house instanter." "Sir," I answered, "I have held a pistol at 1 or 2 heads in my time, but never at one stuffed with nobler indiscretion. Your chivalry does not, indeed, disarm me, but prompts me to desire more of your acquaintance. I have found a gentleman and must sup with him before I make terms." The address seemed to please him. He shuffled across the room to a sideboard and produced a plate of biscuits, another of almonds and dried raisins, a glass, and 2 decanters. "Sherry and Madeira," he said. "There's also a cold pie in the larder, if you care for it." "A biscuit will serve," I replied. "To tell the truth, I'm more for the bucket than the manger, as the grooms say, and, by your leave, the brandy you were tasting just now is more to my mind than wine." "There's no water handy." "There was plenty out of doors to last me with this bottle." I pulled over a chair, laid my pistol on the table, and held out the glass for him to fill. Having done so, he helped himself to a glass and a chair, and sat down facing me. "I was talking just now of my late butler," he began, with a sip at his brandy. "Has it struck you that, when confronted with moral delinquency, I'm apt to let my indignation get the better of me?" "Not at all," I answered heartily, refilling my glass. It appeared that another reply would have pleased him better. I was hoping that, perhaps, I had visited his offense too strongly. As a clergyman, you see, I was bound to be severe, but upon my word, sir, since he went, I have felt like a man who has lost a limb." He drummed with his fingers on the cloth for a few moments and went on. "One has a natural disposition to forgive butlers. Pharaoh, for instance, felt it. There hovers around butlers that peculiar atmosphere which Shakespeare noticed as encircling kings, an atmosphere in which common ethics lose their pertinence. But mine was a rare bird, a black swan among butlers. He was more than a butler. He was a quick and brightly gifted man. Of the accuracy of his taste and the unusual scope of his endeavor you will be able to form some opinion when I assure you he modeled himself upon me." I bowed over my brandy. "I am a scholar, yet I employed him to read aloud to me, and derived pleasure from his intonation. I talk as a scholar, yet he learned to answer me in language as precise as my own. My cast-off garments fitted him not more irreproachably than did my amenities of manner. Divest him of his tray, and you would find his mode of entering a room hardly distinguishable from my own. The same urbanity, the same alertness of carriage, the same superfine deference toward the weaker sex. All my idiosyncrasies I saw reflected in this, my mirror, and can you doubt that I was gratified? He was my alter ego, which makes it the more extraordinary that it should have been necessary to marry him to the cook." "Look here," I broke in. "You want a butler." "Oh, you really grasp that fact, do you?" he retorted. "And you wish to get rid of me as soon as may be?" "I hope there is no impoliteness in complimenting you on your discernment." "Your 2 wishes may be reconciled. Let me cease to be your burglar, and let me continue here as your butler." He leaned back, spreading out his fingers as if the table's edge was a harpsichord, and he stretching octaves upon it. "Believe me," I went on, "you might do worse. I've been a demi of Magdalen College, Oxford in my time, and retained some Greek and Latin. I'll undertake to read the Fathers with an accent that shall not offend you. My knowledge of wine is none the worse for having been cultivated in other men's cellars. Moreover, you shall engage the ugliest cook in Christendom so long as I'm your butler. I've taken a liking to you, that's flat, and I apply for the post." "I give £40 a year," said he. "And I'm cheap at that price." He filled up his glass, looking up at me while he did so, with the air of one digesting a problem. From first to last, his face was grave as a judge's. "We are too impulsive, I think," was his answer after a minute's silence. "And your speech smacks of the amateur. You say, 'Let me cease to be your burglar, and let me be your butler.' The mere aspiration is respectable, but a man might as well say, 'Let me cease to write poems, let me paint pictures.' And truly, sir, you impressed me as no expert in your trade, but a journeyman housebreaker, if I may say so." "On the other hand," I argued, "consider the moderation of my demands. That alone should convince you of my desire to turn over a new leaf. I ask for a month's trial. If at the end of that time I don't suit, you shall say so, and I'll march from your door with nothing in my pocket but my month's wages. Be hanged, sir, but when I reflect upon the amount you'll have to pay me to get me to face tonight's storm again, you seem to be getting off dirt cheap," cried I, slapping my palm on the table. "Ah, if you had only known Adolphus!" he exclaimed. Now, the third glass of clean spirits had always a deplorable effect on me. It turns me from bright to black, from lightness of spirits to extreme sulkiness. I have done more wickedness over this third tumbler than in all the other states of comparative inebriety within my experience. So now I glowered at my companion and rapped out a curse. "Look here, I don't want to hear any more of Adolphus, and I've a pretty clear notion of the game you're playing. You want to make me drunk, and you're ready to sit prattling there until I drop under the table." "Do me the favor to remember that you came and are staying at your own invitation. As for the brandy, I would remind you that I suggested a milder drink. Try some Madeira." He handed me the decanter as he spoke, and I slowly poured out a glass. "Madeira?" said I, taking a gulp. "Ugh, it's the commonest Marsala." I had no sooner said the words than he rose up and stretched a hand gravely across to me. "I hope you will shake it," he said, "though as a man who after 3 glasses of neat spirit can distinguish between Madeira and Marsala, you have every right to refuse me. 2 minutes ago you offered to become my butler, and I demurred. I now beg you to repeat that offer. Say the word, and I employ you gladly. You shall even have the second decanter, genuine Madeira, to take to bed with you." We shook hands on our bargain, and, catching up a candlestick, he led the way from the room. Picking up my boots, I followed him along the passage and down the silent staircase. In the hall he paused to stand on tiptoe and turn up the lamp which was burning low. As he did so, I found time to fling a glance at my old enemy, the mastiff. He lay as I had first seen him, a stuffed dog if ever there was one. "Decidedly," thought I, "my wits are to seek tonight." And with this same, a sudden suspicion made me turn to my conductor, who had advanced to the left-hand door and was waiting for me with a hand on the knob. "One moment," I said. "This is all very pretty, but how am I to know you're not sending me to bed while you fetch in all the countryside to lay me by the heels?" "I'm afraid," was his answer, "you must be content with my word as a gentleman that never, tonight or hereafter, will I breathe a syllable about the circumstances of your visit. However, if you choose, we will return upstairs." "No, I'll trust you," said I. and he opened the door. It led into a broad passage paved with slate, upon which 3 or 4 rooms opened. He paused by the second and ushered me into a sleeping chamber, which, though narrow, was comfortable enough, a vast improvement, at any rate, on the mumpers' lodgings I had been used to for the many, many months past. "You can undress here," he said. "The sheets are aired, and I'll fetch a nightshirt, one of my own." "Sir, you heap coals of fire on me." "Believe me that for 99 of your qualities I do not care a tinker's curse, but as a man who after 3 tumblers of neat brandy can tell Marsala from Madeira, you are to be taken care of." He shuffled away, but came back in a couple of minutes with the nightshirt. "Good night," he called, flinging it in at the door, and, without giving me time to return the wish, went his way upstairs. Now, it might be supposed I was only too glad to toss off my clothes and climb into the bed I had so unexpectedly acquired a right to. But, as a matter of fact, I did nothing of the kind. Instead, I drew on my boots and sat at the bed's edge, blinking at my candle till it died down in its socket, and afterward at the purple square of window as it slowly changed to gray with the coming of dawn. I was cold to the heart, and my teeth chattered with an ague. Certainly I never suspected my host's word, but was even occupied in framing good resolutions and shaping out an excellent future, when I heard the front door gently pulled to, and a man's footsteps moving quietly to the gate. The treachery knocked me in a heap for the moment. Then, leaping up and flinging my door wide, I stumbled through the uncertain light of the passage into the front hall. There was a fan-shaped light over the door, and the place was very still and gray. A quick thought, or rather, a sudden prophetic guess at the truth, made me turn to the figure of the mastiff curled under the hall table. I laid my hand on the scruff of his neck. He was quite limp, and my fingers sank into the flesh on either side of the vertebrae. Digging them deeper, I dragged him out into the hall and pulled the front door open to see the better. His throat was gashed from ear to ear. How many seconds passed after I dropped the senseless lump on the floor, and before I made another movement, it would puzzle me to say. Twice I stirred a foot as if to run out at the door. Then, changing my mind, I stepped over the mastiff and ran up the staircase. The light no longer shone out into the left-hand passage, but, groping down it, I found the study door open, as before, and passed in. A sick light stole through the blinds, enough for me to distinguish the glasses and decanters on the table and find my way to the curtain that hung before the room where the light had first attracted me. I pushed the curtain aside, paused for a moment, and listened to the violent beat of my heart, then felt for the door handle and turned it. All I could see at first was that the chamber was small. Next, that the light patch in a line with the window was the white coverlet of a bed, and next, that somebody, or something, lay on the bed. I listened again. There was no sound in the room, no heart beating but my own. I reached out a hand to pull up the blind and drew it back again. I dared not. The daylight grew, minute by minute, on the dull parallelogram of the blind, and minute by minute that horrible thing on the bed took something of distinctness. The strain beat me at last. I fetched a veritable yell to give myself courage, and, reaching for the cord, pulled up the blind as fast as it would go. The face on the pillow was that of an old man, a face waxen and peaceful, with quiet lines about the mouth and eyes, and long lines of gray hair falling back from the temples. The body was turned a little on one side, and one hand lay outside the bedclothes in a very natural manner, but there were 2 dark spots on the coverlet. Then I knew I was face to face with the real householder, and it flashed on me that I had been very indiscreet in taking service as his butler, and that I knew the face his ex-butler wore. And, being by this time awake to the responsibilities of the post, I quitted 3 steps at a time, not once looking behind. Outside the house, the storm had died, and white sunlight broke over the sodden moors. But my bones were cold, and I ran faster and faster. Oh, isn't it good? The butler is so remarkably calm and self-possessed when someone shows up in the house just moments after he's committed a murder. He rides it out remarkably. And eventually it must occur to him that he can pin the murder on this housebreaker if he's clever about it. I only wonder why he waits so long to leave the house. Presumably he's covering his own trail or stealing from the dead man or doing something. He appears to be going through papers, documents, and manuscripts before executing his new plan. And our housebreaker, Gabriel Foot, another gutsy character, likewise able to think quickly and take advantage of new opportunities. Do you think he would really have reformed his life and become a proper butler? Or was that just an impulsive idea of the moment? Also, that little section about the wickedness in the third drink is wonderful. And it is true, the third one is the worst. So, this story claims to be an extract from the Memoirs of Gabriel Foot, Highwayman, which implies that such a book exists. But that book does not exist. Perhaps Quiller-Couch was working on such a book. I have found 2 more of his short stories that also claim to be extracts from this non-existent memoir. There might be more of them, but they're not immediately findable. If he started writing these in the 1890s and died in 1944, though, he had plenty of time to finish such a book if he was going to. I like the character of Gabriel Foot, at least as we see him here, smart, resourceful, adventurous, not particularly greedy or violent, able to distinguish Marsala from Madeira. You could probably write a lot of stories featuring a character like that. And at least at first glance, he's way more interesting than, I don't know, Poirot. Interestingly, Canadian poet Al Purdy appears to have written a play based on this story. It's been scanned and it's preserved in his papers in Canada, but I don't know if that play was ever actually produced. I haven't yet read any of the other Gabriel Foot stories, but maybe if they're good and we like this one, I'll go ahead and record them. Let me know what you think. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, you get to hear me make a little confession. Tonight's confession is that I got one of those self-help journals, had a huge number of positive reviews, 5 stars, blah, blah, blah. So when I got it, it was very disappointing to realize that it is yet another low-content book. If you search online, you will find many guides to making passive income selling low-content books on Amazon. I've never myself written a low-content book, but I have written several of those guides. A low-content book is basically any book where the writer doesn't, write much. These books are, say, journals with writing prompts or planners with motivational quotes. Any, Mad Lib style book where the person who buys it actually provides most of the text. This one is not quite that bad, but it is pretty low in content. So I'm doing some of the exercises, and it asks you to reflect on situations and then answer some questions about it. And the questions are so bogus they started to make me mad. They're full of jargon, and they're not at all helpful or meaningful. And the one that really put me over the edge was something like, what self-help technique might change your mindset about this situation? And I'm like, bitch, you're supposed to know the self-help techniques. So I got mad and I started writing in the book that these are all the wrong questions and they're not interesting and they're not helpful, and that a better question to ask would be this one or this one or this one. And then I started thinking about the better questions that I had come up with, and it actually led to some very interesting and productive insights. So I guess I just leveled up on self-help. Watch out for my new book. If you like obscure old stories or you just need a little help, come and join us. Subscribe to the channel and choose notifications so you never miss a story. Please also drop a like on this video or leave a comment below to help other people find the channel, and consider supporting me even further by buying me a book using the link below. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in a few days.